Good afternoon everyone, and welcome to this webinar about the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions work programme for 2016-2017, which was published about 2 weeks ago. My name is Jennifer Brennan and I'm the National Contact Point and National Delegate for the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions, working at the Irish Universities Association. If you have any questions during the webinar, can you please email them to mariecurie@iua.ie. A copy of the presentation and a report about the questions that were answered after the webinar will be available online afterwards, probably maybe 2 to 3 days after today. So just to introduce the Irish Marie Skłodowska-Curie office, it's based here at the Irish Universities Association. We're sponsored by the Irish Research Council. We have 3 main functions: to promote the actions to Irish researchers and research organisations, to support researchers in preparing their funding applications, and to contribute to policy initiatives relevant to the actions. Currently we have 2 staff members, myself working here as National Contact Point and National Delegate, and my colleague Grace McCarthy, who will be working with us until March next year. She is funded to provide Marie Curie advice to the SFI funded research centres and help them with their Marie Curie applications. So if any of you listening are involved in any of the 12 SFI funded research centres, please contact Grace. You can contact her at the same email address, mariecurie@iua.ie, and for everyone else, if you have any queries, you can contact myself. So now that we've almost finished the first 2 years of Horizon 2020, it's a good point to have a look at the success so far in the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions under H2020. So far, Ireland has brought in about €146 million of funding from Horizon 2020. That's in excess of our target for the first year. About €23.9 million of this came through the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions. Of this, almost €9 million was funding for doctoral training projects. We've had over 75 successful participations in the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions, a success rate of 14%. And in the Innovative Training Networks Call of 2015, we were the number 2 performing EU member state. That's in terms of proposals submitted versus proposals funded. So it's been a very good start. Just to focus in on what the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions are about, they have about €6.2 billion of the 80 billion earmarked for Horizon 2020. They're in the excellent science pillar with things like the European Research Council and Future and Emerging Technologies. And they have in common with that they fund all research areas. We don't have any topics or thematic calls, and no research area is prioritised over the other. And instead of implementing it via topic-based calls where they ask you for particular programmes that tackle a particular research area, we have annual calls for proposals across 5 main programmes. When I'm asked what the difference between Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions and the rest of Horizon 2020 is, I usually say that it's based more around the researchers that will take part in the projects rather than the research that is to be performed, and the benefits to those researchers in terms of their career training, their career development and their mobility. So we have 5 main funding calls coming up in the 2016-2017 work programme. First one is the ITN Innovative Training Networks. We have RISE, Research and Innovation Staff Exchange, CoFund, which is a co-financing facility for fellowship or doctoral programmes. We have NIGHT, European Researchers' Night, which is a public engagement or outreach activity, and we have IF, the individual fellowships. And over the next 35 minutes or so, I'm going to take you through each of these 5 options, describing what they're about and what you need in order to be funded. One of the things that has become really important since the transition from FP7 into Horizon 2020 is this area of intersectoral cooperation. So in FP7 we spoke a lot about industry academic cooperation. In Horizon 2020 we're talking about cooperation between what we call the academic sector and the non-academic sector. An academic essentially really means higher education institutions, public research organisations such as Teagasc, and the international European interest organisations like CERN and EMBL. A non-academic essentially is anybody else who can take part in Horizon 2020. It does include industry, including multinational companies and SMEs. It could also include civil society organisations such as charities, non-governmental organisations, community bodies, the government, also cultural bodies such as archives, libraries, museums, theatres, and there really is no limit on who can take part in the programme. Starting off with the individual fellowships programme. So this is a personal fellowship to support a period of mobility. It's open to anyone who at the call deadline is what's called an experienced researcher. That's someone who either has a PhD degree or has 4 years of full-time research experience after their bachelor's degree. There's no upper experience limit and there are no age limits. So contrary to the general opinion that these fellowships are for young researchers or early career researchers, these are actually open to anyone at any stage of their career once they meet the minimum of being an experienced researcher. They are fully funded, so your salary is covered, employers' costs are covered, and there's quite a generous budget for research and training costs and also for management and overheads for the organisation that would host you. The programme supports career restart and reintegration into Europe. Career restart being people who have been out of their research career for at least a year before applying, and reintegration being researchers who have been previously working in research in Europe, either from here or long-term residents who've been outside in what we call a third country, somewhere like America or Australia or Japan, who now want to come back into Europe or who have recently come back to Europe. There's also the possibility to undertake a secondment during your fellowship of a number of months' duration, and this could be to an organisation which is from the non-academic sector if you choose an academic host organisation, so say for example from a university to an NGO, and vice versa if you choose a non-academic host, it could be from a company into an institute of technology, for example. So we have two main kinds of individual fellowship, the European Fellowship and the Global Fellowship. The European Fellowship is open to anybody anywhere in the world, regardless of nationality or citizenship, who would like to come to carry out a fellowship of 1 to 2 years duration at a European research organisation. That can be academic or non-academic. When we speak about Europe in this programme, we mean the 28 EU member states, but also the countries who have associated themselves to Horizon 2020. They're called the associate countries, and these are places like Norway, Israel and Turkey, and a list of these can be found online. The fellowships can last from any duration from 1 to 2 years, and within the European Fellowship we have options for what's called the Standard Fellowship, the Reintegration Fellowship, Career Restart Fellowship and Society and Enterprise Panel, which is a new thing for 2016 and I'll speak more about on the next slide. The second option then is a global fellowship, which takes researchers who are currently in Europe, who either are from Europe or are long-term residents, people who've been working in research for more than 5 years before they apply. And then they can go for up to 2 years to a country outside of Europe. So the most popular destination is the USA, but other places like Canada, Australia, Japan, South Africa are also popular destinations for this programme. You get funding for up to 2 years in that country outside Europe, that third country, and then you get funded for a reintegration year to come back into Europe. So what's very important is, because this is the programme with which one of the underlying principles is mobility, that there is actually a mobility rule. And that rule is that you can't apply for a fellowship in a country where you've lived or worked or studied for more than 12 months in the 3 years prior to the call deadline. So if you wanted to apply for a standard European fellowship and you're currently doing a postdoctoral fellowship in Ireland, you would have to look to a country outside of Ireland for that particular one. However, if you're going to apply for a global fellowship, the rule applies to the country outside Europe. So if you would like to go to the USA and you've been in Ireland for a long time, you can actually travel to the US as long as you've been there for less than 12 months in the 3 years before the call deadline. We do have a relaxed rule for the reintegration, which is the people coming back into Europe, for the career restart, which is for people coming back to a research career after a break of a year or more, and also for the Society and Enterprise Panel, that you can have been no more than 3 years in the 5 years prior to the call deadline. So what that means is, if you're somebody who, say, did a PhD in Ireland, who went to Australia to do a postdoc and has been back in Ireland for, say, a year or 18 months, you may still be eligible to apply for a reintegration European fellowship, even though you've been back in Ireland for quite a while. Okay, so this is the only really new thing for 2016 and 2017 in the work programme compared to the previous 2 years. And this is the dedicated Society and Enterprise Panel part of the European Fellowships. It's a dedicated evaluation panel for the European Fellowships, which are hosted in the non-academic sector. So industry, as I said, civil society organisations, NGOs, archives, libraries, anybody. An earmarked budget of €10 million has been set apart for this, which means there's probably around 50 two-year fellowships available. During the fellowship, you do have the option of linking with an academic organisation. So if you were to identify, say, an SME who are very research active who could host your fellowship, but you would like to link with a local university or institute of technology or an academic organisation in another European country, it's possible to do so. And these fellowships are of any duration from 12 to 24 months. Just to remind you that there are many other individual opportunities for fellowships in the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions through the ITN programme, through the old IAP programmes in FP7, and also through the co-fund programmes. And these are all advertised on the EurAccess website at euraccess.eu or euraccess.ie. The next call I'm going to talk about is the Innovative Training Networks call, or ITN. And this is about quality of research training. So while the individual fellowships programme focuses on funding experienced researchers after the PhD level, ITN focuses on funding early stage researchers, so those with less than 4 years of research experience after their undergraduate degree. The focus of ITN is on improving the career prospects of these researchers, equipping them with a broad range of research and transferable skills, and also promoting mobility during their research training, both international and intersectoral mobility. So what does a typical ITN look like? A typical ITN is the following. It's a consortium of organisations from different countries and from different sectors, so we have this academic, non-academic cooperation. We have two different types of participants in an ITN. We have the beneficiaries, and these are the ones who actually recruit in the early stage researchers and host them at their premises for up to 36 months. And then we have partner organisations who come in to host the secondments and provide training, and I'll talk about that more on the next slide. These consortia propose a joint research programme which is 48 months long, and they each then recruit in individual researchers into the beneficiaries, and each researcher has their own individual research project within that joint research programme. The researchers again must conform to the mobility rule, which I've explained previously. In addition to the research work that they do, the researchers must receive training from the consortium, from the beneficiaries, from any partner organisations, in advanced research skills and also transferable skills. So things like IP and commercialisation and project management and commercialisation, things that are useful for both an academic career but also a career outside of the academic setting. You also are required to organise networking events for the researchers, which could be held alongside the training events where you would deliver the training to these researchers. And what's very important is that each researcher who is recruited in to a particular beneficiary also spends time in another beneficiary within that network, and it really should be another beneficiary who is from a different sector. So if a university member of this consortium recruits a researcher, that researcher should spend at least 3 months, say, at an industry partner or an NGO partner also within the consortium, and that could be a beneficiary or a partner organisation. There are 3 ITN modes or types of ITN that you can apply for. There's the European Training Network, the European Joint Doctorate, and the European Industrial Doctorate. And on the next slide, I'm going to explain the requirements for each of those. It's very important to say that participation by the non-academic sector, so industry or CSOs, is a requirement for all 3 modes. Obviously, it's an eligibility condition for the European Industrial Doctorate, but it is a requirement for all 3. Because of this increasing focus on intersectoral cooperation throughout all of Horizon 2020, the successful consortia include a very healthy mix of academic organisations and non-academic as well. Just to point out that this is an extremely competitive call, and the success rates typically were less than 10% last year. They were 6.3% for the ETN, 9.2% for the EJD, and 9.6% for the EID. So in order to be funded in this call, you really have to have a really great consortium, a great research idea, great ideas for training the researchers, and also an extremely high quality, well-written proposal. Now we're going to go through the 3 different kinds of ITN. So we have first the European Industrial Doctorate, or the EID. Then we have the EJD, European Joint Doctorate, and we have the ETN, European Training Network. For all of these, the maximum project duration is 48 months, and typically it takes 48 months to run the programme. For EID, the minimum number of beneficiaries in your consortium is 2 from 2 different countries from 2 different sectors. So this could be a company in one country and an academic organisation like a university in another. It could equally be a civil society organisation or a charity in one country, and then a university or an institute of technology in another country. For EJD, because there's a doctorate requirement, the minimum consortium is 3 beneficiaries from 3 countries who are all entitled to award PhD degrees. And for ETN, it's 3 beneficiaries in 3 countries. They can be all from the one sector or all from a different sector. On top of the beneficiaries who form the core of the consortium and who are responsible for recruiting and training the researchers, you can have as many partner organisations as you like. Partner organisations are ones that come into your network to provide perhaps additional training to the researchers, and they also would offer the opportunity for researchers to move from, say, their core beneficiary host out to a partner organisation for a number of months for a secondment. The early stage researchers themselves are funded for any duration between 3 and 36 months. And if you were to go for the full 36 months for each of them, with the EID, if you stick to a 2 beneficiary project, you can get enough funding for 5 early stage researchers, and if you even add 1 more beneficiary, like make it 3 or 4 beneficiaries, you can get enough funding for 15. And for the EJD and the ETN, the maximum number is 15 ESRs. Looking at the educational requirements, so what the researchers should be working towards as part of the ITN, in an EID they should be working towards getting a PhD degree. And the trick with EID is that the researchers have to spend at least 50% of their time in the non-academic sector. So in the example of an industry partner in one country and an academic beneficiary in another country, the researchers may be recruited into the academic beneficiary for 36 months but would spend at least 18 months working at the industry partner in another country. With the EJD, a joint or double PhD degree is required at the end. And with the ETN, actually there's no educational degree required for an ETN, but a PhD programme is typical for these. So just to illustrate how these ITNs work in practice, I'm going to show you some examples of ones that were funded in the 2014 call. This is an example of an ETN project. It's called Remediate. It was funded to the tune of €3.725 million. This project has 10 beneficiaries from 5 different countries involved, and as you can see from the colour coding, 7 of these organisations are academic and 3 of them would be considered non-academic. In addition to this core consortium who will recruit the researchers, so this particular one recruited 14 researchers, and those researchers will be assigned a home organisation within the 10 beneficiary consortium, but they would also spend time at other members of the network. And then the 15 partner organisations would offer additional secondment opportunities for the researchers. So the researchers, for example, might be recruited into DCU, but might spend time in TE laboratories or might spend time at one of the partner organisations in the US or in Canada as well. The second example is of a European industrial doctorate project, and this is a very simple one. It's just the 2 beneficiaries in 2 countries, 2 sectors. This is Queen's University Belfast in the UK, and we have the Irish Laboratory Diagnostic Services Limited here in Ireland. Their project is funding about 4 early stage researchers who are carrying out their PhD half between Queen's University and half between ILDS. And this one actually has no partner organisations, incidentally. You don't have to have partner organisations if you don't need them. And obviously, in writing this proposal, they were able to convince the evaluators that they had everything they needed within these 2 beneficiaries in order to implement the project. The final example is of a European joint doctorate project. And so you can see this is a smaller consortium. The typical EJD consortium size would be somewhere between 4 and 8 beneficiaries, slightly larger than the typical EID and slightly smaller than the typical ETN, which could be as many as 10 or 12 beneficiaries. So this one involves 5 different beneficiaries, only one of which is from the non-academic sector, and I have seen consortia for EJD which have been entirely academic, but which have non-academic partner organisations to provide that non-academic training and secondment opportunities for the researchers. And this one is coordinated by Spain, and you can see it involves beneficiaries from Poland and another one from Spain and from the UK and Germany as well. And this is funded to the tune of €2.5 million. The next call I'm going to talk about is the Research and Innovation Staff Exchange, or the RISE programme. RISE is about promoting transfer of knowledge between different countries and different sectors of the economy. It essentially is a research program which you execute by exchanging your existing research staff around the consortium. And staff is really a catch-all term. It describes any research students, postdoctoral fellows, research fellows, the group leaders themselves, any technical or managerial staff involved in the research program as well. Those researchers have to be active at your organisation for 6 months before they go on secondment, and they can go from any duration from 1 month to 1 year, and you can split those into shorter visits if you wish. In addition to that, the consortium is expected to organise networking activities, training activities, project meetings, where the whole consortium comes together. It's possible in RISE to collaborate with any sector and any country worldwide, and this is one of the ones where they strongly encourage you to look at bringing in partners from outside of the EU, particularly those countries that are automatically entitled to receive funding from Horizon 2020, places like Chile, like South Africa, like Peru, for example. There's no mobility rule here, so the researchers don't have to comply with any mobility rules about minimum times in certain countries. You can send them to any country that you wish. The funding for this is smaller than for the other calls. You essentially get €2,000 a month for travel costs for the person who goes on secondment, and then for every month of travel that occurs, you get €2,500 for networking, management, etc. So the more secondments that occur and the longer that they go on for, the larger your budget becomes for networking and training and organising meetings. It's important to say that I mentioned already that there are some countries who are eligible automatically to get funding from Horizon 2020. There are, of course, lots of other countries outside the EU who would be considered high income and wouldn't automatically be entitled to receive funding. So in general, places like the USA, Canada, Japan, and Brazil would be eligible to participate in this program, but typically with their own budget. And the examples on the next few slides I will show you illustrate this. So my first example is of a project where all of the beneficiaries are actually based in Europe. And when this happens, there's a requirement that if you have a 3-beneficiary consortium, at least one of your beneficiaries must be from a different sector than the other. So your minimum eligible consortium for this kind of program is 2 academic beneficiaries and 1 non-academic beneficiary, or vice versa, each of which comes from a different European country. And we'll see how they have fulfilled this in this particular project called WASCARD. So this one involves the University of Ulster as coordinator, so that's the UK. It involves Waterford Institute of Technology here in Ireland, and it involves INSA Lyon in France. So there's 3 different countries, and that meets your minimum. Because they are required to include non-academic beneficiaries as well, they have actually included 3 in this project. We have a company from Croatia, we have a healthcare trust from the UK, and we have a company from the UK, actually based in Northern Ireland. And when you have an all-European project like this, the rules are that all of your secondments must go from one country to another and from one sector to another. So just to illustrate this, here's a dividing line which shows the academic partners in blue above it and the non-academic in red below it. And the eligible secondments that would be allowed in this program are the following. So the University of Ulster would be allowed to send researchers to the Croatian company and vice versa. They wouldn't be allowed to send them to Waterford or to INSA because they're academic, so they're not sending from one sector to another. And they wouldn't be allowed to send anybody to the UK or Northern Ireland company or healthcare trust because that's within the same country. Those could be funded from their own budget, but they wouldn't get them funded from the RISE project. If we have a look at what Waterford can do, Waterford has more options in this program. They can exchange researchers with Croatia, with the healthcare trust, and also with the company. And INSA Lyon are in the same situation. In contrast, once you have an international project, so one that brings in beneficiaries or partners from outside of the EU, you don't have any intersectoral requirements. So it's fine for exchanges to occur between academic partners in Europe with academic partners outside of Europe and vice versa. So just to show you how this looks, I'm going to show you a consortium that has an all academic, but which has countries or partners from outside Europe and inside Europe as well. So we have the University of Plymouth in the UK, we have Ghent University in Belgium, we have Liverpool in the UK, and we have CSIC, which is a public research organisation in Spain. We also then have an Ethiopian university, a Nepalese university, and the Scripps Institute in the US. And the reason this is highlighted in red, I'll explain in a moment. So your dividing line here is between Europe and outside of Europe. So just to illustrate, the University of Plymouth in this particular programme would be able to get funding to exchange researchers with Jimma University in Ethiopia and Kathmandu University in Nepal. But in the case of the Scripps Institute, because this is a high-income country, they would get funding to send their researchers from Plymouth to Scripps, but the return journey from Scripps to Plymouth would have to be paid for by the Scripps Institute's own budget. But of course, all of the networking and training events that are happening within the project, the people from the Scripps Institute will be able to travel to as well. The available secondments in this programme are the same actually for Ghent, for Liverpool and for CSIC as well. So I won't repeat them to stop the slide from looking like a spider's legs all over it. Okay, so the two examples that I've shown you are of essentially a consortium that's all entirely in Europe, which has different sectors involved, and one that's entirely international, has no sectors. Just to clarify this, there are actually sort of three different kinds of eligible RISE consortia. The first one is an intersectoral consortium where all the beneficiaries are from Europe, and the two different sectors, academic and non-academic, are represented. Then you have an international consortium, which is where you have beneficiaries both from Europe and from non-European countries, but you only have one sector represented. And then the final one is where you have both international and intersectoral. So you have beneficiaries from inside Europe, from outside Europe, from academia and from non-academia. And just to let you know that in the 2015 call, the third kind, so the international and intersectoral consortium, did have a slightly higher success rate than the other two types of consortia. The next programme I'm going to deal with is CoFund, and CoFund is a very different animal from the other programmes. It began in Framework 7, and what the Commission did was they co-funded over 175 programmes which funded fellowships for experienced researchers. So any organisation who was running a fellowship programme or who could run a fellowship programme could put that forward to the Commission for co-financing. And we actually had about 8 co-fund programmes funded in Ireland, including the IRC's Elevate programme, the UCD Energy 21 programme and the Assisted programme, which is run by Respect, a charity. And these programmes all received around 40% co-financing from the European Commission, and they had to put at 60% of the financing themselves from their own budgets. In Horizon 2020, it's possible to look for co-funding for both doctoral programmes and fellowship programmes, and this is one of the ones where the success rate is relatively good. It's about 25% of applications were funded in 2014. Last year we had a good success in UCD for the Top Med 10 programme, which is around a research theme of personalised medicine. It's going to be run through a collaboration through the UCD Conway Institute, Systems Biology Ireland and the Charles Institute. And this programme is going to award 10 Marie Skłodowska-Curie fellowships for experienced researchers who will all come to work at UCD. And the fellowships can include a secondment outside Ireland as well. In this case, the co-fund award is providing 30% co-funding from the Commission, and the 70% own funding comes from a pooling of any research funding which is not Horizon 2020, because that will be double funding, within those 3 organisations within UCD. And so they received about €890,000 from the Commission for their programme, which will be worth overall about €2.1 million over 5 years as well. So for anybody who's involved in a large-scale research centre or a large research collaboration where you have some national funding, there's a possibility that you may be able to leverage this towards a co-fund programme and receive top-up funding from the Commission. So anyone who's interested in that programme, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us to find out more. The final programme I'm going to speak about today is Night, or European Researchers' Night, and this is really public engagement and outreach funding to organise an event or series of events on the 4th Friday of September each year. It's a pan-European event. It's hosted in many countries across Europe on the same night, and this year was actually the 10th anniversary of European Researchers' Night, and they had a big celebration of this in Belgium on the 4th Friday of September this year. In applying for this, you can get full funding or part funding, and the part funding that you contribute yourself would be in-kind funding in terms of your staff time, for example. And you can look for funding to run either an event in 2016 or in 2017, or events in 2016 and 2017 as well. And we had the Discover Research Dublin, which was in 2014 and 2015, which was awarded to Trinity College Dublin and the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland the last time that the night call ran in 2014. And they organised a series of events on the Trinity and RCI campuses from 3 until 10 p.m. on the last Friday of September in 2014 and 2015. And if you're interested in knowing more, you can follow the web link there. Finally, probably the slide that most people are interested in, and that's the money. So in Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions, we don't have real costs models, so you don't have to put together a budget for the proposal and work out how much you're going to spend on consumables or travel or personnel. You were given a number of flat rates across a series of predefined budget categories, which means it's very easy to work out the budget. And then the budget is given on the basis of, I suppose, the honour system. So as long as you implement the programme as you should, you will receive the full funding, and you don't have to keep detailed records of expenditure in certain categories like research, training and networking costs, even in the case of audit. So for ITN, the researchers who are hired, the early stage researchers, receive a contribution towards a living allowance, a mobility allowance and a family allowance, which essentially makes up their salary. And then for every researcher month that's funded, the consortium receives €1,800 for research training and networking costs, and management and indirect costs of €1,200. The typical budget for an ITN could be as large as €4 million for 15 researchers funded for 36 months each. For individual fellowships, the budget is somewhat similar. It's a little bit smaller for research training and networking costs, and the living allowance rate is higher than for the ITN. RISE we've already spoken about. It's essentially €2,000 top-up allowance to the staff member who travels, and then for every month of travel that occurs, you can get you can get actually €2,500, again for research training and networking costs and for management and indirect costs as well. Co-fund is slightly different. So co-fund will give you a contribution towards the living allowance for the researcher and a contribution towards the management costs of the programme. And finally then, Researchers' Night is a typical Horizon 2020 coordination and support action where you can apply for 100% eligible direct costs and 25% indirect costs. And for that one you do actually need to put together a detailed budget which will be monitored. So if you're in a higher education institution and you're wondering why you might want to get involved in Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions, there are a couple of things you can think about. The programme is very good for helping you, say, through the RISE programme and ITN, to build links with different research groups, industry and also civil society organisations and cultural bodies worldwide. There's a really good opportunity to increase the number of research students and staff through the ITN and IF programme. Through the IF programme, you can use it to attract leading or up-and-coming researchers to come to your organisation for a time to carry out a fellowship. You could also use the individual fellowships programme to fund a sabbatical abroad for yourself if you are a group leader. And we have seen that people applying for global fellowships through FP7 have come back and gotten ERC funding, which I'll talk about on the next slide. So this is a good way to kind of upskill for an ERC application. And for those of you who would have access to a research budget which is large and could fund a number of researchers, may also have a significant co-financing opportunity through the co-fund programme. Just to underline this sort of route to ERC success that is offered by the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions. So data analysis carried out by the European Commission on FP6 data has shown that people who are principal investigators or leaders on Marie Curie projects like ITN are more likely to win an ERC grant than their peers, and the same holds for people who have been awarded a Marie Curie individual fellowship. So some good examples that we have in Ireland is that two people who won ERC starting grants in 2013, Dr. Aoife Gowan and Dr. David Hoey, are both former Marie Curie fellows who went on a kind of international fellowship, a global fellowship. They went outside of Ireland, actually outside of the EU, for 2 years, and used that time to build up their international network and to upscale in key areas, and then come back to Ireland and then apply for their ERC. And this is actually done in Dr. Gowan's case in the final year of her Marie Curie Award when she returned into University College Dublin. So nice to see that success, and we hope to see more of that in the future. So if you're from a non-academic organisation and you're listening today, say you're from a company, you're from a civil society organisation, you're from a cultural body, you might be thinking, well, why would I get involved in these programmes? So really there's an opportunity for you to sort of build or develop or start to think about a research and innovation base or activities in your organisation. Through the programme you can get access to expertise, access to research facilities, access to experienced researchers, experienced people, and also access to funding through the programme. It's very important to say that there's no percentage co-financing required in this case. You may need to do a little bit of in-kind funding in terms of your staff time, but you are not required to put up a portion of the budget for this particular programme. I think what's nice about the programme for non-academic organisations is that you get to choose your level of involvement depending on what you want to do. So if you just are a complete newcomer to this and you're thinking about getting involved, something you could do is get involved in an ITN proposal or an IF as a partner organisation, hosting short secondments for researchers who would come and spend time in your organisation and maybe provide specific training for those researchers. You could do something that is, as I said, focusing on your core business and your short to medium term research agenda, thinking maybe about recruiting one or more researchers throughout their entire fellowship through ITN, and doing a RISE programme to build around a common project, or maybe even doing an individual fellowship through the New Society and Enterprise panel. And then if you're looking to think about a longer term collaboration or strategy, you could get involved in a RISE programme to gain knowledge from different organisations, to transfer your knowledge into other organisations, and also get really involved as a beneficiary in an ITN, and this is about taking part in shaping the kind of researchers you would like to hire. We've had companies in Ireland who've been involved in this programme, and when you ask them why they do it, they say that with Marie Curie ITN, that they were looking for researchers trained up in a particular way and they were unable to find them in the market. So they essentially got involved in this programme in order to help train those researchers up to PhD level in their particular area of interest, and then they plan to hire them at the end of the programme. So almost like the world's longest job interview, but obviously very beneficial for the researchers and for the company as well. So to finish off, let's just look at the deadlines for 2016. So the first one that's coming up is the ITN deadline, which closes on the 12th of January. Then we have NIGHT the next day on the 13th of January. RISE closes at the end of April. We have individual fellowships, which will close in the middle of September. And we have the co-fund programme, which will close at the end of September next year. Just important to say that the NIGHT call will only run in 2016. There will not be any call until 2018 for that programme. So if you're interested, you need to get involved in putting your proposal together now. You can get the work programme and call documentation at that link below, and the work programme covers calls in 2017. The time schedule for 2017 is roughly the same as 2016. There may be 1 or 2 days in the difference. So that's it from me. I hope you've enjoyed this whistle-stop tour of the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions in 2016 and 2017. Just to remind you, if you have any queries about what I've spoken about today, you can email them to mariecurie@iua.ie and we'll publish the questions and answers afterwards. So thanks very much for your attention and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.